I'm going to call this Saline City Council meeting to order at 7 p.m. on Monday, February the 1st. If you'd please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'll take the I'll do the roll this evening. And again, I would remind my council colleagues, that in accordance with the new Open Meetings Act requirements, please state your name, indicate that you're present, of course, and then if you would note your geographic location, that would be great. So Mayor Marl is present from City Hall, Saline, Michigan. Mr. Gearbaugh.
Present, Saline, Michigan.
I just texted Mr. CO. I don't see him with us this evening. Councilwoman Dillon will be absent. Mr. Del Orco?
Here, Saline, Michigan.
Very good. Mr. Kamara-Sulak?
Here in council chambers.
Saline. And Councilwoman Kraus?
Here, Saline, council chambers.
Very good. A quorum is present from city staff. City Manager O'Toole is here, along with Clerk Royal, Treasurer Bennett, City Engineer Fordyce, Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director Green, Police Chief Hart, and Parks and Rec Director Scruggs. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments.
Moved as submitted.
Moved by Gearbaugh to approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
Is there a second? Was that Kamara-Sulak?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor of approving the agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Let's deal with, actually, let's wait till the end of the meeting, just in the event that Councilwoman Dillon and or Councilmember CO are able to join us. So we'll proceed to citizen comments on agenda items. I would remind those who are participating this evening that you can type in questions or comments under the chat icon that appears at the bottom of your screen. Please note that the first public comment period is limited to agenda items. The second public comment period, you may discuss or inquire about any topic within our municipal portfolio. But please indicate when you type, if you do type in your comments, where you would like your comments read. So we'll give folks a few minutes to type in their comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Clerk Royal, were there any comments, questions, statements emailed to you in advance of tonight's meeting?
Yes, I have 3 for the first public comment and 1 for the second one.
Okay. So why don't you go ahead and read the 3 for this first public comment period.
I also wanted to address, there's somebody who put on a chat that they're here for the 7 p.m., but they can't unmute. I just want to let them know that we don't unmute. So you will need to type in any comments you have under this chat section. So the first thing I have is from Mary Hess, and she says, since the city is looking at East Look drainage problems, I am requesting the city address the over 40 years of drainage problems in Canterbury Park. To provide some background information, Mayor Morrow stated that he would like me to bring in my papers. I called a couple of days later. Mayor Morrow said he had copied them and forwarded them on to the city attorney for them to be reviewed and comments. This was around September 17th, 2020. I have asked Mayor Morrow twice if he had received a reply from the Saline City Attorney. He told me that he had not received a reply. I believe that I have been patient for over the years. Therefore, I am now asking City Manager Colleen O'Toole to follow through on the Canterbury Park drainage problems. If I can be of any help with information, please feel free to contact me directly. And then she left her phone number and email. The second one that I have is from William Dix and Stephanie Gray, and it says, Dear Mayor Morrow and City Council members, as residents of Huntington Woods Phase 2, we would once again like to express our continued desire to see a sidewalk go in that will connect our neighborhood to the surrounding Saline community. In addition to hoping to be able to ride our bikes or walk to local stores and restaurants, we also very much want our 2 growing sons to one day be able to visit their friends' houses and utilize our local parks without having to get in a car to do so. At the moment, there is absolutely no way we would let them take the bend around Monroe by themselves on their bikes. We aren't even particularly comfortable riding our bikes out of the neighborhood ourselves right now, given how many fast drivers take that curve before they see the 25-mile-per-hour sign. We recognize that there are continued roadblocks to this project, no pun intended, but we very much hope that a solution can be found so that as full city tax-paying residents of Saline, we can safely leave the neighborhood, not just by car, but also by foot and bike. And then the last one is from an affected Saline Township family regarding these sidewalks. Although there are 2 township properties that are directly impacted by proposed sidewalk, a total of 5 different township homes addressed their concerns at the October 5th sidewalk meeting. Stated there among those concerns were 200 to 300-year-old trees that may die, no crosswalk plans, liability and maintenance issues, and contamination spread. Our family's 2.5-acre parcel borders Adient's 290 Monroe parcel, sharing a very long property line with them. After doing much research and after speaking directly with Adient's environmental attorney, Eagle, and the EPA, it turns out that there absolutely is risk of Adient's contamination spreading to our property as a result of sidewalk installation. We are gravely concerned of the health effects not only for ourselves but also of our forest ecosystems and its many wildlife inhabitants. There's also considerable risk that contamination could spread to our well water, which we use for everything, including drinking. If our property tests positive for any contamination whatsoever, it has to be reported and remediated, and our 2.5-acre property value would also plummet. If sidewalk goes in, and if any of our property tests positive for any contamination, who will be liable to reimburse us for lost property value, any related health problems, and the cost of remediation? Would it be Adient? Would it be the City of Saline for pushing the project with known issues? Would it be Washtenaw County Road Commission for approving it? Or would it be all of the above who is responsible? Adient stated that there are many PFAS and VOCs at both the 232 and 290 parcels, and that much remediation and more testing needs to be done at 290 in the utility corridor, exactly where current sidewalk plans reside. How can remediation be performed with a sidewalk in the way? How can remediation occur at the 232 north parcel if the future sidewalk is to go there too? This is not connecting a sidewalk. It's only half a sidewalk that leads to nowhere. The maintenance and liability issue also remains, and our legacy trees that could die from sidewalk installation. A Huntington Woods board member said that they are working with Pulte for liabilities. But what happens when Pulte is gone? Who will take on all liabilities for sidewalk for all future decades of its existence? Our property is more than 400 feet long. An NFL football size is 300 feet. Who will take on the eternal maintenance of edging, debris removal, repairs, and all top coating if using asphalt, and tree removal and compensation if they die? In summary, it would be reckless and irresponsible to go forward with any sidewalk plan with the current unresolved issues and risk. What is right and fair is right and fair for everyone. This is well beyond a quality of issue life for my family. It is a right to live and be healthy, and a right to be free from all associated liabilities. That's it.
Very good. Were there any additional comments or questions typed up under the chat icon at the bottom of the screen, Clerk Royal?
No, sir.
Okay, very good. We appreciate those comments, and they will be addressed during the discussion portion of tonight's agenda. I would also note for the record that Councilmember Seo has joined us. Welcome, Jack. And we'll proceed now to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
Mayor, I'd like to remove the contract extension C21-14.
Okay, so remove C-21-14. With that, Mr. Gearbaugh, would you move to approve the consent agenda as amended?
Yes, I will.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh boy, that was two at the same time. I'm going to go with Del Orco on that one. I'll get Councilwoman Kraus on the next one. So it's properly moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as amended, striking item C-21-14, which will appear as the first item under new business. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We come now to item C-21-14, approval of the city engineer contract extension.
Move to accept, acknowledge receipt.
Move to acknowledge receipt. Very good. Been moved by Gearba to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Kraus. Thank you. Can I start with, well, actually, Mr. Gearba, why don't you raise any questions and concerns that you have, and then we'll turn it over to staff, either our engineer or city manager, to respond.
Yeah, I guess this question would be for Manager O'Toole. Can you clarify our approach using cost sharing on travel expense? I don't understand why we'd do that. Normally, we'd reimburse for actual expenses that are attributed to the trip. I've never really seen a cost sharing proposal unless there's some kind of personal travel involved.
Well, so the decision was based on the somewhat unique situation of Mr. Fordyce being largely still an employee, but in a sort of hybrid contract type relationship. I don't think that he would have any objection to the city treating his contract the same way that it does other travel expenses for regular full-time staff. But the decision or the offer to cost share was based on kind of the unique nature of the relationship.
Was that a recommendation by the city or by council members?
That was a recommendation. That was my kind of common ground recommendation with Mr. Fordyce.
Okay, just from the perspective, generally when I look at travel and the way I've been in my previous positions and such, we always pay for the cost of getting someone to and from where they're at. Yes, there may be some personal travel, which we would exempt from that. I just didn't want to know if we were itemizing and doing a 75-25 split on everything, and just seemed inappropriate and could end up being an IRS issue and everything else too. So, however, I just wanted that clarification because we got a change in the documentation just recently this afternoon and wasn't sure what or why we were doing that.
Yeah, the question did come up from a council member. Councilmember Dillon had asked for clarification on how we would handle that. And to be fair, it was not something that Mr. Fordyce and I had discussed yet. So it was a fair point that I wanted to try and address. But certainly, if it's not something that council feels comfortable with, then additional comments are welcome.
I'm fine with it as long as it's something that you and he already previously discussed. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a last minute change and something that's out of our standard practice. So if that's not the case, then I'm fine with the way it's written.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gearba. Any additional questions for the city manager? Don't see any hands up. All right, we have a motion on the floor moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearba, seconded by Councilwoman Kraus to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Mr. Gearba, you want to make offer motion to approve?
Move to approve. The contract is written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Kamara-Sulak. Is there any discussion? There appears to be none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 21-15, Water System Risk and Resiliency Assessment and Emergency Response Plan. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the January 26, 2021 memo from Engineer Fordyce and to approve or not to approve the AWIA Water System Risk and Resiliency Assessment and Emergency Response Plan proposed by Tetra Tech in the amount of $36,500.
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Moved by Gearboss simply to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by CO. Mr. Fordyce, do you care to comment before we open it up for questions?
Sure. This is a new a new federal requirement that came in with this act that was approved into law in 2018. The EPA took a phased approach as to deadlines for water utilities, and we are in the third round with our deadline being June 30th. And I've worked with Tetra Tech in the last budget cycle to get this included in our budget, and we've been working together to kind of scope it out. And Tetra Tech has prepared the proposal that's included in your packet that details a number of the requirements that EPA has put on us. And I think that's kind of any questions I'd be happy to answer.
Very good.
And Mr. Rubel is here too if any questions.
I'm going to turn it over to him right now. Mr. Rubel, you can unmute yourself, or perhaps our IT director can unmute you. Mr. Rubel, is there anything that you would like to add at this time before we open it up for questions? And you are muted currently.
Okay. Yeah, Jeff did a nice job summarizing that. He and I have worked on a scope of work over the last few months to edit it. Municipalities take a wide range of how to approach this. Some, like Ann Arbor, have done a very, very complex, detailed look at complying with this act, really dove into recommendations, and others are taking a much more minimal, let's do, kind of the minimum that we have to do. I think back and forth with Jeff, we've ended up more towards the light side, but kind of a light to medium side approach to this. It requires the city to look at things like natural hazards, malicious acts, cybersecurity, resiliency of suppliers, just so you have a good feel for where your vulnerabilities are. And it will be a workshop approach. We'll meet with some key stakeholders within the city, the engineer, the water, wastewater superintendent, your IT director. We'll trade ideas in a workshop approach. We'll go back and crunch some numbers, look at some options, and bring them back to that committee to develop next steps. And Tetra Tech really does have a head start on this, and that's reflected in our fee. The records that we have from the design of the water treatment plant, the elevated water tank, industrial park, and some other projects will really add some efficiency to this. There is no requirement to do a deliverable with the risk part of this, but we've decided that it would be helpful to have something, if you're going to go through this effort, to have a document that you can refer to in the future and give some next steps. So we have added that. And then the last step we'll do is a more detailed plan to respond to emergencies, and that's updating a report that Tetra Tech developed about 4 years ago for the city. So again, there's some efficiency there. And it's going to take a couple of months to go through this. And with that June deadline, it really is important that we do get started here in February sometime with this. So with that, I'll be quiet and certainly be available for questions.
Very good. We'll open it up for a round of questions. We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, and please direct your question to either Mr. Rubel or Mr. Fordyce, or of course, you may also have inquiries for the city manager. Mr. Gearbaugh, the floor is yours.
I'm glad to have this actually study being done, because I think part of it has come up during our risk management interviews and so forth about concerns and issues about these type of concerns. As you mentioned, the dollar amount, well, that part of this is going to save us in terms of some of the previous work that we've had done. Any kind of a dollar amount to that effect to which you could address, just so that the public could understand why we would continue to go with your firm instead of necessarily bidding this out?
I would say there's a $5,000 to $10,000 savings to build off of the information that we already have. Yes.
Okay. Any of this information, will it be helpful in terms of our new plan and everything else that we're doing, and possibly for some of the, I would say, information that's needed for the revolving loan fund?
This is strictly on the drinking water side. So we will not be looking at resiliency at the wastewater system for this project.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. That's it for me.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Let's transition now to Mr. Seod. Any questions?
Yes, I just have one, I guess. I was looking at the price tag, and I know when the state requires we do things, there's this often bandied about term unfunded mandate. This comes from the federal government. Is there any money attached to it to help us get through this?
I'm sorry to say there's not, and this is exactly what it is, an unfunded mandate. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Rubel. I appreciate it. No further questions, rather.
Thank you, Mr. Seod. Mr. Delorco.
No, Dean hit on a lot of the points that I was going to make. I was not clear that it was on the drinking water side only, and I also had wondered if there was an opportunity to have any overlap with prerequisite studies for the state revolving fund, so it doesn't appear to be the case. However, as part of our wastewater treatment plant expansion, is there any areas of the wastewater or the water treatment plant that will need to be looked at for the state revolving fund as well as the wastewater treatment plant?
There's a separate funding program for drinking water improvements. It is a revolving fund loan. It has a slightly different name, but going back to your original question of does the wastewater revolving fund require looking at the drinking water system? The answer is no.
Okay, so in the event that we need to go through and make upgrades or capital improvements to our processing of at our water treatment plant, is this going to be helpful as prerequisite information for the SRF in that vein?
Not necessarily, but no, this is not a prerequisite requirement for the SRF. It is strict federal requirement.
And it's mainly dealing with risk assessment data.
That's correct. They want to make sure that you're prepared to respond to any risks and that you've looked at resiliency to respond to those risks in your drinking water system.
And this has come about as of 2018, so the city has never been required to engage in this kind of study before.
There was a similar study done just after 9/11 to prepare drinking water utilities for similar types of risks. And to the extent that information that is available will be looked at and reviewed as part of preparing this analysis.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Rubel. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Delorco. Mr. Kamara-Sulak.
Yes, thank you. I do have a couple questions. First off, I think it's good that we're doing this with respect to the quality of our water and making sure that our water system is operating and as risk-free as possible. So my question is, in the past we've had challenges with having manuals and the additional information that the city needs to provide to Tetra Tech. Do we know if we have all the data compiled that they will need?
Some of this, I think, will be issues that we have not looked at before. One of the specific requirements in this is some cybersecurity elements, particularly in the billing system and protection of data, and then also, cyber attack access to the plant. So these are issues that we have not fully vetted before at this level. Anyway, obviously we have our security systems and on our networks, but this is a first specific look at the water side of it. So that will require some staff time to pull together information on that. I think the bulk of the rest of it is in our fairly standard monthly reports. And then we also, as Brian mentioned, we'll have these workshops where it's kind of a little bit of a brainstorming activity. We go through a bunch of what if scenarios. What if some bad actor decided to do this, and then how does that impact the system, and what might our response be? And we don't want to talk about those too publicly because we don't want to give people ideas either. There'll definitely be staff time involved in this, especially because it is it's a very interdepartmental thing. We do need the water folks, we need the public works folks, we need the police, we need the IT, we need the billing folks. So it will be a time commitment on staff's part.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fordyce. It sounds like this will be really revealing and all the more necessary. My second question is, in the overall proposal assumptions, and throughout the document, these are the minimum federal requirements. And if there are additional measures, security measures that are necessary, that'll require a separate authorization, do we know anything about what that looks like, or not to take the cart before the horse, but the possibility that will happen? And maybe Mr. Rubel has experience with this from other communities?
I mean, I'd say there's definitely a possibility that when we go through this exercise that we're going to identify issues that we want to change. That the end result of this is the emergency response plan. So, that will have a plan for each of these threats and what we might do to respond to them. But then going further from that, certainly we might go through this analysis and decide something needs to be changed, whether it's a physical security thing or a cybersecurity thing or just a process or having some resource on hand to respond to something. I think the whole point of this exercise is to take the time to look at those things and be prepared. And yes, those things most likely will have some additional cost that we can't quantify at this point.
Okay, so this is something that we should consider when we look at our budget here next month.
Yeah, having a contingency item in there to implement any recommendations or to begin implementation of recommendations is a good idea.
Okay, very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Kamara-Sulak. Councilwoman Kraus, any questions?
Thanks. Just not really a question, just a comment. I already spoke with Mr. Fordyce earlier today. My big concern was the deadline and knowing that we might be down staff. So my main concern is that we have enough staff and it doesn't burden them and we can hit the deadline. And Mr. Fordyce assured me that even though it's interdepartmental, the nature of threat assessment, pulling from police and different departments, that he was completely assured that the departments could come together and with Tetra Tech's work and meet the deadline. That was my main concern. And he answered that earlier today. That's all.
Very good. Thank you, ma'am. Then we have a motion on the floor moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearboss, seconded by Councilmember Seal, simply to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to approve or not to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Gearboss to approve, and it was seconded by Kamara-Sulak. Is there any discussion? There appears to be none. Mr. Fordyce, Mr. Rubel, thank you for your work on this important initiative. I fully support it and will be voting in the affirmative. If there are no additional comments, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of approving, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you both. We move on to new business item 2116, determination of mayor council salaries for 2021-2022. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from the Local Officers Compensation Commission with the notice of determination setting forth salaries for the mayor, mayor pro tem, and council for 2021-2022, and to approve or not to approve the increases in salary for 2021-2022.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Moved by CO to acknowledge and to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Kraus. I think the memo from the Local Officers Compensation Committee pretty much says it all. Clerk Royal, I'm not sure you have anything to add, or the city manager, but subsequent to that, we can open it up for questions or comments. Nothing from the city manager. Clerk Royal, I'm assuming you have nothing to add?
No, sir.
Very good. Well, let's start with comments or questions. Mr. Gearbaugh, would you like to begin? Either a comment or a question?
Just a comment. I appreciate the work that our commission always does on this. I think it's again one of those things that we take advantage of people serving on this. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic and everything else, I'll be voting no on this just because of the optics. I think it's one of those type of situations that even though we do a lot for what we get paid, it just is not the time to support it at this point. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Councilmember Seal, any comments or questions?
Yes, Your Honor. The reason that I support approving this is that of late we've had a number of additional meetings, special meetings. We've had work sessions. We've had closed sessions. We've spent many more hours at the work of council than we have in the past. And just as by way of public notice, this is only a raise of $150 a year for each of the 2 years. So it's not any extraordinary amount of money either.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Mr. Delorco, anything you'd like to add?
I really have nothing further to add. I support the motion. I agree with Mr. Ciro on this. It's not a significant amount of money for us, and I do believe that the compensation board has met in earnest and worked out and spent time to make things just and equitable for everyone on board, and I think it's fair.
Very good. Mr. Kamara-Sulak?
Yeah, I appreciate all the work that the Compensation Commission does, and this falls in line with bringing things at current levels, so I will be supporting this motion.
Very good. And Councilwoman Kraus?
Agree with Mr. Del Orco. The compensation, the work that they did was important. Thanks for their service. I'm learning that there's a lot of work behind the scenes and it needs to be appreciated. I will be voting in favor.
Very good. Well, I'll make it unanimous on one front, which is we do appreciate the confidence in the work done by those members of our local officers compensation committee, along with the staff liaison, Carol Joyce, who's the office manager for the Saline Area Fire Department. My record on this particular matter, this issue, has been very consistent since I was first sworn in and began serving as a member of City Council in January 2009. I've never voted in favor of a pay increase. As some of my colleagues have indicated, it is not about the money. The money is a very nominal amount, but I do think there's some symbolism and optics involved. I do the job because I'm deeply passionate about this community and its future. And even if I wasn't paid anything, I'd still do it and derive quite a bit of satisfaction and pleasure in doing so. So I will not be voting in favor of the motion, but again, appreciate the confidence and the support that was extended by way of this recommendation from the local officers compensation committee. With that, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion moved by CO, seconded by Kraus to acknowledge and to approve, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries 4-2. We move on to new business item 21-17, OHM siting study review proposal. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the February 1st, 2021 memo from City Manager O'Toole and to approve or not to approve the proposal from OHM advisors for a siting study review in the amount of $14,500 and authorize, not authorize the City Manager O'Toole to sign the agreement.
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Moved by Gearbox to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by CO. Ms. O'Toole, would you care to comment, and then we will open it up for questions.
Absolutely. As council may recall, this is a recommendation that came out of our conversation during the January 11th meeting when we were pre-qualifying engineering firms. There was a desire expressed to have a second look at the January 2020 wastewater treatment plant siting study prepared by Tetra Tech. We were able to connect with OHM, provide additional details to what that scope should involve, specifically looking at some of the underlying fundamental assumptions that went into preparing that siting study, as well as looking at the specific locations themselves. OHM does have a bit more knowledge in regards to the Ypsilanti system, so I know that will be part of what they bring in terms of their expertise in looking at that option and outside proposals. But largely speaking, again, just reaffirming the underlying assumptions that went into that proposal initially, making sure that we have the most recent information moving forward.
Very good. Thank you, City Manager O'Toole. We'll open it up for questions and/or comments. Begin with Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh.
Just a couple questions. The general gist of this approach is to primarily do a validation of all the aspects that we've looked at, correct? In terms of the study?
Yes, that is correct.
Regarding the future flows and that assessment, is that going to be independent or is that just a validation? I almost would like to have an independent review of that to make sure it's clearly accurate.
My understanding is it would be its own review. We do have Marcus McNamara from OHM, who is our point of contact on this as well, if anyone has specific questions for him.
If we could ask that question of Mr. McNamara, that'd be great.
Yes, I'm sorry I did not acknowledge our guest. Mr. McNamara can be unmuted and he can respond to Mr. Gearbaugh's question. Mr. McNamara is still muted. There you go.
There you go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, so and I do have Krista Tech is with our team here as well. I don't know if she'll need to be unmuted for technical questions, but the scope does include a review of the UDA assumptions, the acreages, the most intended use for the flows that would be expected for those areas.
So you'll take the information that we have and make your own assessment and numbers, and that if they should differ from what Tetra Tech has, you'll present that information to us?
That's correct. Based on the acreages and the zoning or potential zoning, we will do an evaluation of what the maximum CFS for those areas would be.
And will that include any potential severe weather events or that type of aspect?
Yes, well, the peaking factors are always included in flow assumptions.
Okay. And then when we look at the other assessments, in terms of you'll be looking at the study, you'll be looking at all three options, including the Yucca hybrid approach that we had originally talked about, even though we've eliminated that one?
So the way we set up to attack that issue was, yes, to do an initial review the correspondence of why specifically that option was determined not to be an option, and essentially confirm that alternative has been evaluated to its full extent.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, there may be some other option. I mean, I understand that there's some capacity concerns that Pittsfield has, but really what we're doing here is obviously taking the step with SRF is a significant step, and committing to one of these. This decision is a very big decision, so we want to be absolutely certain that the alternatives have been evaluated completely, and so that will include the YCUA connection option as well.
Okay. And then lastly, so you'll provide any confirmation or add any additional assumptions, risk, or other surprises that could potentially present themselves among these three different type options that we've been given?
Yes.
Okay. With that, I appreciate your being here tonight. That helps immensely in understanding what's being proposed, and I'm in support of this this contract. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Councilmember Seal, any questions or comments?
Just a comment, Your Honor. On the one hand, I become increasingly upset with how long it's taking us to get this issue moving forward. We continually talk about how important it is, but yet it seems like one issue after another comes up to continually delay it. And every time we make one of these delays, it ends up costing us money. In this case, the cost of the additional look at the wastewater treatment plan. On the other hand, I'm certainly not discounting the help that OHM could provide us in taking a second look at this. So I guess for that matter, I'm somewhat inclined to vote for the proposal in spite of my misgivings. So that's all I have to say.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Seal. Councilmember Del Orco.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple questions, maybe for Brian to start out with, and then certainly Mr. McNamara as well. Under the review of potential sites for wastewater treatment plan on page 59 of the packet, one of the objectives is to consider the implications of recent RBC failures and repairs on long-term viability for continued use. As I understand it from my conversations with Tetra Tech and council members through the working groups and through all the time that we've spent analyzing the approach to expand on site, that it was concluded that the RBCs would be phased out. And I'm wondering if it's necessary to go into the scope and detailed analysis of what we're doing with RBCs, because I feel like it's antiquated technology that we're moving away from.
Jim, was that directed at Brian Rubel?
Either of you can respond to it, either yourself or someone from OHM.
Yeah, I can comment that the siting study did move away from the RBCs. So it's sort of a new analysis, I guess, if it is to be looked at to keep the RBCs.
Okay. Does someone from OHM want to comment on that, Mr. McNamara?
I would ask if the host could unmute Krista.
Sure.
She's the technical expert in this, could probably answer this more accurately than I.
He's
Okay.
unmuted.
We were just aware that a lot of money had been spent in the past year rehabbing some of the RBCs, so we didn't know if it would be more attractive to the city to keep those, and if they've been rehabbed, at this point, we don't know the extent of what the rehab involved, but if you spent a considerable amount of money invested in it over the past year, and you wanted to consider keeping those rather than having them as a sunk cost, then we are willing to consider that in our analysis. But if you're totally committed to moving to activated sludge or some sort of other secondary process, then we are willing to follow your lead on that one.
Okay, thank you. I just want to try to adjust the scope to get the biggest efficient outcome and data from the study. I can't speak for my council colleagues, but I have certainly resolved to move away from the RVCs, and I can't speak for anyone else, but I'll just let that be known. The second comment I have is with respect to the opening paragraph discusses existing agreements with Lodi Township and Saline Township that have been signed, annexation agreements to provide annexation of selected properties as development is proposed. Maybe Colleen or someone could comment on, I guess I'm just not aware of any signed and fully executed annexation agreements with either Lodi or Saline Township.
Yeah, I can address that somewhat, and then maybe Colleen or Jeff or somebody else from staff can jump in. To my understanding, I'm glad that you caught that, Mr. Delorger. I'm not exactly sure what it would be referencing in terms of Lodi Township. As far as Saline Township goes, over the past several decades, there have been numerous parcels that have been annexed into the city from Saline Township. So I think Saline Township is applicable. I'm not sure what it would be referencing or referring to in terms of Lodi Township.
The agreements I think it's referring to is the master planning agreements.
Oh, excuse me.
The master plans of Saline Township and Lodi Township include areas that are predetermined to be annexed at the time that is necessary.
So you're talking more specifically about UDAs, undeveloped areas, not annexation agreements.
Not annexation agreements, no. This refers to the UDAs.
Okay, I guess I would be more comfortable voting in favor of this if we could modify the language in the project understanding section.
I don't see any reason why that would be objectionable or why anyone would object to that, to make it clear that it's referencing UDAs and not specific parcels that have been annexed or might be subject to annexation. So I think that verbiage can be changed without objection.
Okay, I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Kamara-Sulak, any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you. I think it's a good idea to look over and have another set of eyes on the siting study. We're spending a lot of taxpayer money, and I think this is in the best interest of our ratepayers. Then the only other question that I had was, when did the state raise or change the capacity from 85 to 90% before having to go into planning for a new treatment plant? And did anything else change with that?
My understanding is that has been part of the ongoing negotiations related to the administrative consent order. So it's not formalized, but we expect it to be formalized.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kamara-Sulak. Councilwoman Kraus.
Hi, thank you. Just one question I wanted to clear up. On page 60 of 66, towards the bottom, there's a bullet point, OHM will not evaluate alternate locations. But in the front, towards the front, page 59 of 66, they are reviewing potential sites. So I assume that means they're not evaluating a different locations other than the 3 that were already evaluated, but that seemed vague to me, and maybe that could be clarified or cleared up a little as well.
That is correct. The intent was we'll review the alternate sites that were included as part of the initial study. We can clarify that language that further additional sites are not included in our analysis.
Yeah, that would be great, since we're already sending it back for that one correction. Thank you. And then other than that, just thanks for Colleen we talked about this. We knew this was coming. It's under the threshold to go to council, but I certainly appreciate her bringing it to the table, just so that the public can be aware of the next step and transparency with the wastewater treatment plant. So I appreciate her working so quickly and getting this back to us. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Kraus. I don't have any questions. Let me add, I too appreciate City Manager O'Toole working expeditiously to get this on a council agenda. I strongly support the proposal that's in front of us and will be voting to approve and authorize in just a moment. I think it is essential to have a second set of eyes review the siting study, specifically the grow-in-place option that we developed consensus on at our most recent meeting. And I would say, for the benefit of the public and those who are in attendance this evening, that the siting study, specifically the grow-in-place option, is looking at this issue from a very high level. We are not yet at the point of designing new equipment, ordering that new technology, and integrating it into our system. Much work, much time, and much money remain to be spent and allocated, which is why it is so essential that a second set of eyes review the documents that we received from Tetra Tech in early 2020. So again, fully in support of this motion. I think the evaluation and analysis that it will be done will be beneficial to us. And again, thanks staff for working expeditiously to get this on a council agenda. With that, if there is nothing further, we do have a motion on the floor moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, seconded by Mr. Seo, to simply acknowledge receipt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. I will actually offer a motion now to approve and to authorize, if there's a second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Gearbaugh. I'll catch you on the next one, Ms. Kraus. Is there any additional discussion?
Just to confirm, does this include the change in the language?
We made the one change per Mr. Delorco's recommendation, if that's what you're referencing, Councilmember.
Yes, to the master plan and the UDAs, yes.
That was changed without objection.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Any additional comments? There appear to be none. We have a motion on the floor then to approve and to authorize. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it. The motion carries 5-1. We move on now to agenda item 21-18, tent fee waiver. Let's begin with a simple motion to acknowledge receipt, because I think some things may have changed between when the agenda and support material were distributed and today. So was that you, Mr. Gearbaugh, who moved to acknowledge
receipt?
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Kamaris Sulak. Assistant City Manager Green, are you with us?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Do you want to provide a brief synopsis of your memo dated January the 27th? And then I didn't have an opportunity to speak to you today, but I did speak to Mr. Feldkamp, one of our building inspectors, as well as City Manager O'Toole. And so I know that the recommendation may have been modified somewhat, but I'll turn it over to you to give some background.
Yep, so just quick little brief background. The city was approached by a couple businesses who are looking to erect some tents for outdoor seating for the next few months. One of their hopes is the city can waive all the fees or some of the fees to help assist with this, just so they can save some costs throughout this process. So that's what this memo is outlining. And included in the memo, I listed all the fees that are associated with erecting a tent for such purposes. And as the mayor mentioned, I know Mr. Feldkamp had a chance to talk to Ms. O'Toole and the mayor about this earlier. So I don't know if we can turn it on over to Colleen to see if she has a change of recommendation.
Yeah, Colleen, can I turn it over to you? I can't I don't want to re-articulate what you stated to me earlier today, but I thought your recommendation was perfect. So,
Yes, Mr. Feldkamp brought to my attention that obviously there are certain required costs affiliated with this that the city would have to bear regardless. But his interpretation was that we could reduce these fees by roughly more than half if we just slim down the permit process to just be the zoning compliance and review permit and just the fire safety inspection fee. We would still perform all the regular inspections, electrical and any other affiliated reviews, but we would only charge the base fees for the zoning compliance review and the fire safety inspection. That would be a flat rate of $75 for the zoning review and $50 for the fire safety inspection.
perfect. Thank you, City Manager O'Toole. Let's open it up for questions or comments. I'll begin with you, Mr. Gearbaugh.
So we're proposing not to waive all fees, if I'm
That's
understanding?
correct. I kind of jotted down a revised motion here. Of course, we simply have a motion to acknowledge receipt now, but the subsequent motion would be to approve the waiving of all fees excluding zoning compliance and fire inspection with tent permits for outdoor dining purposes, and to have the fee waiver expire the same day as ordinance number 824.
Okay, and the reason why we're not waiving those other two fees you just mentioned is because members of council don't feel we should waive that fee?
I believe that that's a staff recommendation, that we have certain costs affiliated with performing those inspections regardless, and we have an obligation to perform those safety reviews regardless. Obviously, it is council's discretion whether they would like to waive the full fees or partial fees. But after discussing with the staff involved, the standing now is that we simply just trim down those fees to focus exclusively on the zoning compliance review and the fire safety.
So there's a recommendation from staff to feel that we're getting at least some portion of our fees that are really required no matter what, and to protect the safety of our residents. That's fine. I guess, one other question. Does this also apply to structures that are not tents?
Not as currently presented, no.
Okay, because I've got more concerns with those as a safety and health issue than the tents, so that can be a different discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Mr. Seal, any questions?
I have none, Your Honor.
Very good. Mr. Delorco?
I think the recommendation for the revision of the fees structure is a good one, and I support it.
Very good. Mr. Kamara Sulak?
Yes, I agree and support the motion. I just have one quick question, just to add on to Mr. Gerbaugh's concern regarding other structures. So suppose it's like an igloo or who knows what else. Is that something that we'll take up if that comes to pass, or how would that be viewed?
From the building department standpoint, it's a case-by-case basis. We'd have to determine how you qualify that. For example, an igloo, I'd qualify that as a tent. But then there's other things that I know Mr. Gearbaugh is referring to that it's a completely different issue that just deals with different sections of the building code. So it's just a case-by-case basis. If we get a certain amount of cases that don't meet our tent guidelines and they request fee waivers too, we'll probably bring that back as well. But I personally just don't see that happening.
Okay, thank you. That relieves my concerns.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Kamara Sulak. Councilwoman Kraus, any questions or comments?
Thank you. I have no questions, and I do support the revised fee schedule that was discussed.
Very good. Thank you. I don't have any questions. Appreciate staff's work on this, and I think this was an important gesture I think it's an important step that we take to provide some support and relief to our businesses, specifically our restaurants, during a very challenging time. The city prides itself on being pro-business. on extending a hand of cooperation and support to our local entrepreneurs, our enterprises. And I think during a global health pandemic and a subsequent shutdown of the local economy, that these types of steps and actions are necessary and appropriate. So I will be, in just a moment after we approve the motion to acknowledge receipt, which was moved by Gearboss, seconded by Kamara Sulak, I will be offering a motion to waive most of the fees, excluding zoning compliance and fire inspection. So with that, we do have a motion on the floor moved by Gearboss, seconded by Kamara Sulak, simply to acknowledge receipt of the January 27th memo from Assistant City Manager Green. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. And Mara will make a motion to approve the waiving of all fees associated with tent permits for outdoor dining purposes, excluding zoning compliance and fire inspection, and to have the fee waiver expire the same day as ordinance number 824.
Second.
Seconded by Seal. Is there any additional discussion? There is none. Then we will proceed to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. We proceed now to the discussion portion of our agenda. First up is Commission, Committee, and Task Force reports from Council. Mr. Gearba, I'll start with you.
Planning Commission meetings have been postponed until March, so we haven't had any action. And we're still doing well in terms of our risk management and moving forward. We just recently summarized the majority of all of our risks and are now trying to bring them down into a smaller group. And then hopefully we'll have something to present in the next month or so for the council. And lastly, our wastewater treatment task force have met 3 times now, and we will be bringing forward to council kind of a diagram and also a report card to identify the key functions and major functions and aspects of how things are working at the wastewater treatment plant in terms of if they're being worked on, if there's an issue with it, and how we're handling that. So looking forward to that, and I think the group has worked well. John Ambrose joined us this last Thursday, and so we have a complete task force committee now, and seems to be moving away, providing a lot of support and understanding to support Ms. O'Toole and however we move forward and doing additional repairs and so forth. And that's it.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Gearba. Mr. Seal, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Zoning Board of Appeals is going to meet on the 11th at 7 p.m. We're going to have our first meeting for this calendar year to elect officers and so on. And then there's an issue that's coming before the Zoning Board of Appeals as well. And it's the matter of, and it slipped my memory right now. So I'm sorry, I don't have the documents in front of me, but there is one matter we're going to discuss this month.
Very good. Mr. Del Orco, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Yes, I'm proud to state that the Code Review Task Force has finalized and reached consensus on the medical marijuana facilities ordinance, and that is going to be coming to Planning Commission at hopefully on their next agenda for their input and review as well, in addition to some insertion of zoning ordinance approval that we were working with and we need Planning Commission's input on. So that's moving to Planning Commission, assuming everything goes well there. I'm assuming it'll come back to Code Review, and then Council should be having the opportunity to review those ordinances in the very near future. The Environmental Commission had a very productive meeting when we met on the 20th of January. I'd like to take a moment to welcome Chris Smith and Jen Harmount as newly participating members of the Environmental Commission. We went through the process of establishing who is going to serve as chair of the committee since Luke has stepped down, and it was decided that Bruce Westlake and Terry Branoff will share the responsibility of serving as chair and co-chair respectively. And then we are taking upon ourselves in the Environmental Commission to review the bylaws and take a broader stance on moving the Environmental Commission in the direction of being able to establish sound recommendations that we can bring before council in hopes of enacting policy for environmental concerns. So I thought it was a very productive meeting.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Del Orco. Councilmember Kamara Sulak, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Yes, I do. The DEI Task Force has been working diligently to promote and compile the recipes and the meaning behind the recipes for the community recipe book. So we're looking for recipes that are cultural in nature, that have meaning, and maybe from your childhood or something that you love to make and eat. So please submit your recipes to the Saline DEI at gmail.com or website, Facebook page, or Twitter. We're also very happy to have Miss O'Toole join us, and everyone got to meet her. Secondly, the Art and Culture Committee met, and I don't know if anybody's noticed, but the sculpture has been reinstalled. That's the sculpture on North Ann Arbor Street, behind the cheese shop, in the parking lot there, before the Henschel Dojo. It looks brand new. It looks great. So anybody driving by, look on the east side of the road. Also, a big thank you to DPW for not charging for the removal and reinstallation of the sculpture. They worked very hard, and that was very much appreciated. The other big item is the Art Around Saline. All the wonderful pieces of art have been submitted. There's well over 100, and they are now in the hands of the jurors, who will be narrowing it down to the top 20, and then it'll go from there. Also would like to welcome new committee member, Tamara Moore. She's already been contributing, and we look forward to all the great things that we're gonna do going forward. So that's all. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councilwoman Kraus, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Thank you, Mayor Merrill. I did not have any this week, but I was grateful to be able to pop into the DEI task force meeting and just see what they are up to. Super impressed with the list of subcommittees that they are working on right now and dividing out tasks and trying to identify all the different options and areas within DEI that need to be addressed. So Kirsten Woodside and other Candace Jones and Mr. Kamara Sulak and the other people who are on that. That was pretty impressive. I was happy to sit in. It's Black History Month. That's really important. That just started, so I'm excited to see what or how they're going to incorporate that. So I was energized. It was nice to see. That's all I've got.
Very good. Thank you for that. Well, if there are no additional commission, committee, or task force reports, how about we transition to reports or other announcements? I'll begin. I just have one. I had a coffee hour scheduled for later this week that has been postponed and rescheduled to February the 26th, which is the last Friday of the month. It will begin at 8 a.m. in council chambers. We will broadcast live on Zoom and Facebook. We will likely allow a few people to attend in person if that is their wish. We will share a press release probably in the next week or so, and the main topic of conversation will be infrastructure, not limited to wastewater and water, although that will be a primary focus. We'll also be talking about sidewalks, connectivities, pathway, and upcoming street and road projects. Additional announcements. Mr. Gearbaugh, do you have any?
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that we've been successful in a couple of property sales that we're looking at, and hopefully those will be moving forward. And Mr. Steele, that was one of the hot top issues that will be presenting itself as a discussion on a potential interpretation of I-2 zoning for one of the property sales out in the off of Teff Court, I believe it is. I'm trying to remember which park name that is. Maybe the mayor knows better than I do. And then also the potential sale for a lot in the Sauk Trail. So we're doing well on moving forward and ridding ourselves of some of our assets. So it's a good thing.
Yes, it is.
Reddy's.
Yeah, Reddy's, the Reddy's Park.
Reddy's, thank you.
Yep, it is very positive. Let's move these from public ownership to private ownership. We'll be able to generate some revenue from the sale of the property, get them added to the tax roll, and see additional jobs and amenities created and offered to our residents. So that it is very exciting. Mr. CEO, any other reports or announcements?
I have none, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Del Orco?
None, Your Honor.
Mr. Kamara-Sulak?
None at this time.
Okay, Ms. Kraus?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, then we proceed now to the East Look Drain. City Manager O'Toole and I have discussed this on a few occasions subsequent to our most recent City Council meeting, and I want to turn it over to her just to make sure that we have consensus and staff and legal counsel can move forward without confusion or delay.
As discussed at our last council meeting, what we need from council now is a clear consensus to move forward with one of three options. Based on the comments that I received during that conversation, I did provide additional detail in the memorandum that you received related to the expenses that we've incurred to date related to this project. Roughly $4,800 has either been expended or is expected to be expended, and possibly slightly more beyond that. My recommendation at this point is that council consider making that a formal commitment, removing that amount, the $4,800, from the total amount that's assessed against the property owners, and move forward with option number 2, which would be amending the tax rolls and hosting another public hearing to move forward with the special assessment district.
Thank you, City Manager O'Toole. That was clear. Let me start by offering my perspective, and we'll see if we can generate consensus. I've been pretty consistent on this all along. I think, one, we need to move expeditiously and solve this problem. It is a quality of life issue, and it is adversely impacting a number of property owners on our city's south side. I've also been clear that I wanted the city to have some skin in the game and participate financially. And while from my own perspective, I'd like to see some additional financial support provided, I am comfortable with the city manager's recommendation because I want to move forward aggressively and get this work complete. And I can rest comfortably knowing that we have contributed at least a reasonable amount towards a solution. So I'm in favor of her recommendation, endorse option 2, and I'm eager to move forward. Let me turn it over to Mr. Gearbaugh if you have any questions. Otherwise, please state your opinion as well.
I guess I need to clarify again for myself and understanding. When we talk reasonable amount, what are we talking about?
What, City Manager O'Toole, do you want to re-articulate the number that we've invested thus far?
The amount that we've invested thus far is approximately $4,800. And that was the amount that we had originally articulated when we estimated the total. The total that we originally estimated for the project was $25,980. So we would reduce that amount by the $4,800 that we had originally budgeted for attorney fees, publications, and other administrative costs related to the public hearings for this process.
That's what I want to clarify, that we're only removing the administrative costs. Any direct costs will still be attributed to the assessment.
Yes, the actual construction costs will be fully attributed. These are costs that are already sunk costs for us.
Okay. Although I feel that we've spent a lot of time on this trying to solve this problem, it's a lesson learned, and in the future we need to address how we're going to handle this going forward. I think there's a lot of cost on this as a result of, well, council's inexperience and some other aspects, but to get this project done, because it is important that those homeowners and those individuals, this gets resolved, I'm in support of moving forward with this, with the waiver of the city incurred expenses.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. That was clear. Mr. Seal?
Even though I was initially opposed to having any contribution on the city's part, it occurred to me that even if this project did not move forward another day, you've already spent that money. So it would seem fair to me to have the city pick up that portion of the assessment and not have the homeowners pay for that, because it's, as you said, Ms. O'Toole, a sunk cost. We've already spent the money. We will have spent it whether or not the project goes forward or not. So to remove it seems fair, and especially if we can move this project along. So I'm in favor of going with that proposal.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Seal. That was clear. Mr. Del Orco?
Yes, my position on this has been consistent throughout, and it is very closely aligned with that of the mayor's. I think the city manager's recommendation is a good one. It's a show of good faith that we are putting some skin in the game. I've worked diligently to work through this matter with my council colleagues, and I've maintained a consistent position throughout. I'm not quite sure what the inexperience of council comment was about, but I'm confident that I'm holding the city to an appropriate standard, and I want to move forward on this issue.
Very good. That was clear. Thank you, Mr. Delorco. Mr. Kamara-Sulek.
Yes, I think the memo is laid out very clear. Thank you, Ms. O'Toole. And I agree with the sunk costs that shouldn't be passed on to the homeowners there. We've also spent a lot of time on this. This is kind of a new area for all of us, so it is a lesson learned, and I will be supporting this motion.
Very good. Thank you, sir. And Ms. Kraus.
Thank you. I emailed with Ms. O'Toole today to make sure I understood the options. I am in favor of option 2 and will be voting will be giving consensus accordingly. Thank you.
Very good. I think we got it unanimous for you, Ms. O'Toole.
We'll see if it stays that way, you guys.
Yeah. Let's hope so. Thank you. Let me take just a moment then to also address the concerns that were raised by Mrs. Hess during the initial public comment period, because they did indirectly relate to the Eastlook drainage issue. It is true that she came to my office and we did meet and discuss the Canterbury Swale. She did provide me a number of documents. To be completely candid, I did not provide those documents to the city attorney because I'm not exactly sure what it is that I would be asking the city attorney's office to review or to comment on. I think it's important to level with people, and respect is shown by telling our constituents the truth, not placating them, not infantilizing them, not telling them what they want to hear, but telling them the truth. And the truth is that subsequent to the swale upgrades that were initiated in 2009 and 2010, the vast majority of problems relating to flooding and water retention at Canterbury Park and at the adjacent properties, especially those on the north side of Canterbury Drive, have been resolved. I've not been provided any evidence or data to suggest that Mrs. Hess's property is eroding into the park due to the Canterbury Swale. I've not been provided any evidence to suggest that water infiltration in her basement is due to the Canterbury Swale. I think the Canterbury Swale functions properly. The only issue or deficiency that I have observed, and I've relayed this to the manager, is that our DPW crews need to have routine maintenance on our work schedule multiple times a year to remove yard waste and debris from the swale in the spring, summer, and fall to ensure that water flows without obstruction. So those are my comments on the Canterbury Swale. I've addressed these many times in the past. Again, to be crystal clear, I think that the swale functions properly. I did receive documentation from Mrs. Hess. They were not those documents and memorandas were not passed along to the city attorney's office because essentially there's nothing for the city attorney's office to review or to comment on. Ms. O'Toole, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Is there anything that you'd like to add? Again, you and I have discussed this on a few occasions. I'm not expecting you to be an expert on the history or the status of the swale, but you may have some insights to share to city council and to the public.
Just that I had a conversation with City Engineer Fordyce. He reiterated your comments, which are that he believes the swale is operating as it is designed. We certainly can make maintenance of that a larger part of our recurring activities. And we do intend to include the storm sewers in that area as part of future camera work, just to perform a condition assessment. But at this time, we don't have any cause to believe that there is any significant deficiencies in those systems.
Very good. Thank you. Well, there's nothing further on either that issue or the Eastlook drain, then just very briefly, for council's edification and benefit as well as the public's, City Manager O'Toole and I have discussed the Huntington Woods connecting sidewalk. We also debriefed Rockwood from the city attorney's office on the matter. We are attempting to draft a agreement whereby Mr. Shipman would relinquish control of the connecting sidewalk grant oversight and the responsibility to construct said sidewalk to the city, while also providing some financial resources to complete the construction work. As most of you know, this is very multidimensional and has several layers. It is a road commission approved project in their right of way. We do need to receive documentation from both Pulte Homes and Huntington Woods and the Huntington Woods HOA regarding long-term maintenance and liability. Per the comments that were made at the beginning of tonight's meeting, I'm not aware how the installation of a sidewalk as currently designed and proposed would contribute to the spread of contamination from the Adient property onto nearby parcels in Saline Township. I have to say in complete candor that is new to me. However, in our ongoing efforts to do the appropriate amount of due diligence, we will evaluate that and look at that. But I'm not aware as to how the installation of a connecting sidewalk in Saline Township would exacerbate contamination issues at the former Universal Die-Cast Hoover Ball Bearing site in the city of Saline. That is a separate issue, and as many know, we've worked aggressively with our contacts at Adient to ensure that site is being remediated. Much work has been done, but much work remains. But the city remains committed to being a good partner and assisting any and all parties to finalize the environmental remediation of that site. So there is nothing tangible to discuss or digest tonight. However, it is our hope to have a draft agreement to present to council for debate and consideration, likely at our first meeting in March, which happens to be March the 1st. So just wanted to provide a little bit of background on that. If there's nothing further to be brought up under the discussion portion of tonight's meeting, we proceed now to the second public comment period. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Clerk Royal, did we receive any comments for this second public comment period?
Yes, I received one from Kristen Mitchell, and she stated, "Hello, council and city staff. I am writing because a note came up on my calendar to check in about the wage study performed by SAGE in 2020. This study showed that there were some wage inequity issues among city positions, particularly noted among women that had been employed between 5 and 10 years in the city. Could you please provide an update to residents sometime over the next month that illustrates what progress has been made in this area? I especially want to highlight any remaining wage inequity during this time of strategic planning, not to mention for the upcoming budget discussions. Thank you for considering." And that's all I have.
Thank you. Okay. We'll just provide folks one last opportunity to type in any questions or comments under the chat icon at the bottom of the screen. City Manager O'Toole, I'm sure you made note of that most recent comment regarding the wage analysis and study. Perhaps either at our next meeting, which is a week from today, or our first meeting in March, you and your leadership team could provide an update, a status report, and also maybe articulate some strategies for accomplishing or resolving, rather, some of the deficiencies and gaps that were reported in that analysis.
I'm happy to report that actually Treasurer Bennett and I are well ahead of you on this request. We already have a resolution drafted, and it will be included on our February 8th meeting agenda to formally adopt that study and to allow staff to begin implementing policy changes to enact the recommendations of that study.
Very good. Well, you exceeded my expectations. Wow. Excellent. Appreciate that. Very good. Well, we'll look forward to having that item on our February 8th agenda. Thank you so much. The chair will note that there are no additional public comments this evening. So if there is no additional business to be brought before City Council this evening, please note, and this is primarily for the public, that we have a strategic planning open house this Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. It is online. It'll be hosted via Zoom. Information can be found on our city's homepage. I would also note to council that in light of the survey results and to ensure that we have a proper understanding of the technology and format for Wednesday's meeting, we are going to have a pre-meeting that begins at 4:45. So please try your best to be punctual, and I will see you then. And then note that our next council meeting is a week from today. So with that, if there's nothing further, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn at 8. Yes, Mr. Gearba, I'm sorry.
I'll make a motion to excuse Miss Dillon's absence.
I'm sorry. Thank you for catching that. Yep, my faux pas. It's been properly moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearba to excuse the absence of our colleague, Miss Dillon. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Creel. Very good. All those in favor of excusing the absence, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. And now is there a motion to adjourn at 8:20?
So moved.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearba. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Kraus. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all, and we'll see you Wednesday.
No.
Night. Night.